So welcome to Good Decisions, a monthly webinar about enterprise AI governance insights. And I'm your host, Jake Holmes from ModelOp. Today, we're going to talk about the explosion of data and AI and how to manage that chaos it can generate, with a special focus on data and AI governance. All right, get the slides moving here. So with us today are several experts. First, we have Jim Olsen, who's the CTO of ModelOp. Then we have Hutchins and Cam Rojas from Macula Systems, who are experts in both data and AI solutions. And then we have Doug Graham, who is the Director of Enterprise Data Governance at Mercy, which is one of the largest U.S. health systems, which operates across, I think, about 7 states, including Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, and whose lineage goes back 195 years. So what we're going to cover are 4 things. So we're going to talk about the boom that AI is driving in data, and then we're going to bring on Cam and Jim to talk about how to navigate that growth with the trends that are driving that AI and data boom, specifically with a focus on data and AI governance. What are those critical capabilities that you need to navigate that exponential growth? And then we're going to bring on Doug and Kyle to give a real-world perspective on the importance of governance at Mercy and share the insights that he's learned over the years. And then finally, we'll close out the 30-minute webinar by underscoring the message that governance isn't just about safeguards, it's about being a business enabler. So with that, let's dive in. All right, so there is a giant boom in data and AI is driving it. And I wasn't really sure how exponential that growth was until I came across this article by Chris Curry. And it in this article, he talks about how he shows a strong connection between global data generation and foundational AI models. And you can see a link to the article and the data sources that he used to pull this chart together. And this chart shows the growth in data in zettabytes versus the number of foundational AI models over the last couple of years. And it can be hard to see or kind of internalize how big this growth is. So just as an analogy, if you think of 1 terabyte as 200 miles, which is like driving from Boston to New York, and then 170 zettabytes, that'd be like flying to the outer edges of our solar system, past Saturn and out to Uranus. So just a massive, massive growth in data. And so that raises the question of how do you manage that? What does that mean for your business? Data is fueling AI, AI is fueling data. How do you manage this for the benefit of your business? And I think there's a hard way of doing it and an easy way of doing it. And that's what we're going to talk about in this webinar. So let's first go into some of the trends behind this growth and how to navigate that with Jim and Cam. Welcome, guys. Take it away.
Yeah, so as Jay just discussed and the chart pointed out, the growth in data isn't slowing down anytime soon. And so I'll talk a bit from the perspective of the data org and data teams. So we have additional sources still coming into play, additional ways that we are interacting with data, both with the growth in streaming and real time. And at the same time, data executives and data teams are feeling pressure from boardroom and stakeholders to meet business demands for data and data products faster, and also bring ML and AI into, evolve them into a more strategic role, which this often requires a decentralized or federated operating model.
Yeah, no, and I mean, as we gather all this data, of course, the real value of data is not just hoarding data or having data lakes or things like that. It's actually putting those to work for a business use case, and that's where we're seeing that data go into ML AI solutions and generative AI, utilizing them in some kind of a a RAG architecture, or now we're seeing some agentic AI, et cetera, as well. So you've got all this data out there, and now you're actually putting it into tons of different models and things that are taking advantage of that to actually be used for business use cases on that. And we're seeing the explosion of these different LLMs. I mean, every week there's something, one is bettering the next one. We saw obviously ChatGPT 4.0 and 4, and their newer reasoning models, but then DeepSeek R1 came out as a new reasoning model. Now we see Grok 3 this week just beat DeepSeek R1 and one things. We're going to continue to see this rapid kind of evolution of models, including distillation of models, where one model is training the other model. So how many data sets went into that? Where are they coming from? What potentially is in there that we need to know about? So as we continue to, especially use these distillation techniques, et cetera, we really need to have some kind of an ability to track back to the data that is both being used for the business solution, but also potentially for the traditional training of AI ML models as well. Next slide, Jay.
Yeah, and so the trends that we just discussed, so the broader trend of data growth, and then some of those underlying trends, how I went into that, the data governance organization and data teams need to kind of meet the demand in the business in a new way, and how Jim just went into kind of talking about specifically what it means for models and generative. These trends are putting additional strain on data teams. And they're exacerbating problems and challenges that already existed. So over here in the blue box, you can see that these are challenges that were here prior to the explosion of data, but are only getting harder to deal with. So oftentimes we'll see data lives in silos. It's hard to share. It's not easy to discover. I don't know who owns what. Accountability of what happens in the data process is unclear. I can't enforce data quality across all of my data products or processes. Trust overall is low about what you're going to do with the data and the quality of the data. And then additionally, we're just seeing another layer of regulatory complexities that are layered on top of that.
Yeah, and as Cam mentioned, trust is a big issue, especially when we come into generative AI. How many stories do we hear about hallucinations? Or I think today there was just a big release from a lawyer firm, basically cautioning all their lawyers against using generative AI in their court case documents, because the AI was making up invalid court cases and et cetera. So it's that lack of transparency of what is really going on into these AI models. What were they trained on, et cetera, in there? And then, yeah, water likes to find its own level. We're seeing within the businesses, even if they don't explicitly use a generative AI solution, many of their workers, as like the example I just provided, are using them themselves out of the things. I mean, it's built into Windows. You've got Copilot right there. Many have ChatGPT 4 accounts, et cetera. So even if you're trying to develop some kind of an enforcement policy of where these should be used, how they should be used, and provide that, we don't have any of that traceability into where they are actually being used within the organization, because there's definitely some level of autonomy at these lower levels, and people are going to be using them. So, and how are they getting into the production code themselves as well? Do you have processes in place that really recognize tying back the uses of ML, AI, generative AI, et cetera, to the purpose, the business purpose they're providing? And how do I locate those, and how do I track that? And we're seeing that there's a little bit of chaos out there right now, as to, much like in the data space, we're seeing even more so as people are experimenting and playing with these technologies and perhaps using them for business purposes that they should not be doing.
Yeah, and often I think Jim and I just kind of talked about some of the perspective from the data organization, or some of our machine learning teams. But what we've seen out there is that these challenges or symptoms are exacerbated or present, especially when an enterprise lacks or has significant gaps in their foundational data governance program and the underlying systems and tools that it uses to manage that. And this has a real impact on the business, right? So more than just the technology perspective, what this could mean for the business is high overhead, manual processes that don't scale for everything related to data, the inability to think about data as products or deliver data products that really tie into strategy and deliver value. And then additionally, just a never-ending loop of compliance fire drills that disrupt work and oftentimes overlook risk.
Yeah, and then never mind to mention lost business opportunities. If you don't know where the data is and what it's representing, and et cetera, it's way harder to take advantage of using a RAG solution or a traditional ML model, et cetera, if you're just not even aware of what data you have out there. So there's the idea of having the chaos within the thing is even finding this information and knowing the data is there so you can take advantage of it with newer techniques to do something meaningful for your business. Next slide there. Yep.
Okay, I'll kick us off on this one. So I think we went through a couple iterations of this slide, and it was an interesting exercise, kind of Jim representing, the ML AI data science team, and myself kind of taking, the living in the shoes of the data org and the governance side of it. And I think at one point had 50 capabilities we wanted to list on here. And we really forced ourselves, because we have only one slide and limited time, to come up with the top 3 capabilities that span across data governance and AI governance. And we really think will have the most impactful, change to how well you navigate this chaos and how quickly you deliver value. So I'll kind of quickly go through them from the data side, and Jim will talk about them from an AI ML side, and we'll have a kind of kumbaya on how they work together at the end. So from the traditional kind of data org perspective, it's really important to have a centralized catalog where things are easily discoverable, and what domain owns what data. Additionally, traceability across the entire data product and lineage, being able to understand what changes were made and where the source system is. And then it's also really key to be able to have the ability to start automating compliance, whether it's automating the detection of specific classifications of data or automating the security and access role policies that get applied to data when it's used for a specific use case.
Yeah, and similarly to that, I mean, just like with the data, you need to know it's there, you need to know what's there and where it is. Well, same thing with your models, and it needs to start with a use case, because a single ML model may actually expand multiple use cases. So you have to have the idea of an inventory of the use cases, the models that it's using, and then of course tied to the data that it consumes to have that, so we can kind of close that full loop. So without an inventory, you don't have any kind of you don't have anywhere to start on that. Similarly, we want that traceability and lineage, and the model is to like let's say ChatGPT-4. Who all is using GPT-4 in my organization? Who is using the new DeepSeek and maybe shouldn't be, et cetera, on that. So having those use cases, models, assets, and all the information about risk assessments, et cetera, tied back to the data, that really just closes a loop and provides you all of that kind of information and gives you that single pane of glass view of the full solution and where it came from and what's going on there. And additionally, nobody wants to do this stuff manually. It's a lot of work. You need a tool like ModelOp that actually automates the full process, makes things happen, drives it through what needs to happen, automates what can be done in matter that, again, you don't want everything to be manual to do this kind of things, and then gives you that lineage that you have in fact gone through all these steps, it's there, you can tie it back to the data and have that complete end-to-end vision of not only the models but of the data, what potential PII that could be disclosed by the model if it went into a RAG solution. You need to understand that hey, this document that potentially contains PII as identified by the data catalog is now also in this LLM usage. That means you have a potential disclosure issue. How are you going to answer all that if you don't have all of these processes and things in place, and why you really need to have both complete solutions in place where you track your data and the models and the use cases.
Yeah, And if you think, I'm thinking about some real world scenarios that I've found myself in. We've engaged with large enterprises that, for all extensive purposes, have unlimited budget and resources. And in an ideal world, you might want to have a centralized data governance solution that is completely vendor agnostic. But it's truly a challenge to stand up those systems completely by your own, and time is not on your side. So I think about tools like Purview, Microsoft Purview, and how those capabilities could be applied across the chevrons that you see down at the bottom. So using a tool like Purview for the data governance piece can help you automatically catalog and organize data into a centralized catalog that is pulling from all of your existing sources on-prem and cloud. It gives you a nice visual map of data flow from also tracking transformations across your entire data products. And you can automatically classify sensitive data and then enforce security policies on that data within the Microsoft ecosystem. So tools like Purview on the data governance side are a huge jumpstart and competitive advantage when it comes to getting data governance done right.
Yeah, and of course, the ModelOp solution, I mean, that's at its core and fundamental idea is to basically provide this for everything from your generative AI models, traditional ML models, logistic regressions, Excel spreadsheets, whatever they are. They all use data. They all make business decisions, and we need to understand, is there, potential bias, potential PII, all these kinds of things. And those questions can be answered by a data catalog, but you need to know where that data is being used and what models are using it and where are those models in production. And that's where our solution can provide that kind of information and provide that complete closed loop in an automated and traceable fashion. Okay.
Nice. Yeah, that's really helpful. And then let's translate that now to the real world. We've got Doug from Mercy, and he's going to share his experience tackling data and AI governance in the healthcare space. So welcome, Doug Graham and Kyle. How are you guys?
Great. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for the setup and introduction. And, Doug, I think about the time that we've known each other and worked together through some of the challenges and capabilities that Jim and Cam just discussed. And I think for our audience today, it's probably helpful to provide a real world journey on what Mercy's going through. And the first question I kind of would tee up, maybe Doug, for your thoughts are, we talk about Mercy being thoughtful, responsible, and effective in AI. I'd love to hear just maybe a little background on your journey and the Mercy journey, kind of at a high level, and where you guys are, and then we can go into a little more of the detail from there.
Okay. Well, thanks, Kyle. Really, one of the core elements of our journey, I started out a few years ago when I came to Mercy, and I was doing a lot of consulting prior to that. I had worked for Mercy before, and then left, and then came back. So I was a boomerang, and was presenting to our executive leadership what data governance is. How do you build a program? What are the most major elements of a program that succeeds? And one of those elements is you got to have executive leadership support. And at that time, I was told, Doug, we really need to make this governance process generational for Mercy. And at that point, I quit my presentation, and I said, okay, let's talk about what that includes. And so we had that executive support at the beginning for our second round of data governance at Mercy. And so we started building our framework, which includes 8 different domains, and all those domains have certain subdomains. And so getting all the business stakeholders together and having an executive leader as a domain trustee and a very operational person as a domain steward in each of those domains really created a lot of conversation about what all are we doing in Mercy and what are we doing together at Mercy around data. So we would have monthly meetings and discussions about that with all these different domains represented. And it gives us the ability to understand together what are some of our challenges. We started discovering where we're re-entering data multiple times throughout the organization. And we started tackling some of those issues so that we can get to a point to where we have the right people engaged in the process to solve the data problem. And then this annoying little mole keeps popping his head up, but there was an AI project that got spun up, and I heard about some activity going on there, and we had to start looking into it and evaluating kind of where does it fit within our organization, and we really looked at it initially as a very high risk, in particular a high risk when the consequences of making a bad decision have such major implications like a health system does. So we immediately started saying, well, how does it fit into our culture? How does this AI fit into our culture? How are we going to be responsible? We called our leaders from a mission perspective together and really started to say, what are we going to do as a ministry? And what are we going to choose not to do as a ministry? And so that was really a lot of the early conversation. And it kind of gave us the right kind of positioning within our organization to be able to make an impact, to affect change, to affect the way that we would implement AI at Mercy.
Yeah, and I think, Doug, what's always impressed me around how you've taken that strategy and that call to action, and then organize teams around it. Maybe sharing a bit about how you, as sort of the lead of data governance, how do you work with the business? How do you work with your data science team? Like, how do you organize them to now, execute behind that strategy?
Really, that has to do with knowing what's happening. What are some of the really needed and business-centric use cases that are necessary? What are the pain points in the business where AI can really provide some value? Which is kind of one of the elements and one of the use cases that I could talk about. There's a lot of them, but one that I could talk about specifically was that ER to IP handoff. So when people move from the emergency room to an inpatient facility or to an inpatient room, there's a lot of information that needs to go with that patient, so that when they're turned over to in the inpatient room to a nurse, they know all of the background of what's happened within that patient encounter. And that was done differently depending upon where you were, who was doing the work, which nurse was getting all those notes. And it took a lot of time to get all that information together for that handoff. And so I heard that there was a hackathon going on, and this, we're having a lot of conversation. So the Data Governance Council was where I heard about the hackathon to solve this problem. And so I listened in on it. I said, well, who are the people that are going to be there? They said, well, we got a bunch of our nursing leadership that are going to be there, and they're going to really drive into a discussion and figure out how to best solve this problem. And so they went down and they did their hackathon. We had our data science team there. We had Carrie, one of our VPs of data science, was at that hackathon, and they worked through the solution in the course of a day, trying to figure out how could we use this better. It included not only the generative AI component, but also had this idea of a SBAR. So what is the situation and what is the recommendation? So the SBAR is situation, background, assessment, and recommendation. That's the common thing that all of these nursing handoffs should have. They defined that and they figured out how can we get that together. It can't just be generative data because it works off of notes, because we also have vitals and we have trends of the vitals for the patient. And you have different tests that have been ordered. All of those need to be combined and brought into this one view. And so the nursing leadership was really the ones who really started that hackathon, created a lot of conversation around the ministry that this is coming. And then a few months later, after a lot of work with these data science teams, Chelsea, who's one of our core data scientists, involved with Tracy, one of our lead nurses, really got into the ER and into the inpatient facilities, and they were working with these nurses. And as they were working with the nurses, they were making changes to some of the ways that the model would prompt, and really improving that process by being directly engaged. And while they're doing that, they're also defining a lot of things that are included in that model. So all of that stuff comes back up to your governance, because that's where it started. It started as a governed process led by the business working through the capability.
Yeah, that's great, and I'm sure our audience appreciates the the hackathon and some of the stories and details there. And I think kind of last, just thought or question as you think about kind of moving into the future here. I know we've outlined kind of 4 different work streams, and they map back to what Jim and Cam walked through around catalogs and lineage and data quality compliance. But anything you would maybe just leave the team with in terms of what comes next for Mercy as you guys continue to mature and evolve your data governance process and program?
So the core things are as we're migrating from different, within the Purview application as an example, we're going through a migration. So we've built all of our governance domains. We have business terms, we have business assets, and we have a lot of documentation there that we're going to be moving into a new Purview platform, which gives you the chance to rethink all the things that you've started with and really say, is this really going to fit in the new paradigm? Because there are some changes. So as things are changing, which they are, you gotta adjust to that. One of the things that we didn't have in scope when we originally started was the idea of a model card for our AI models. And so one of the efforts that we're at Mercy trying to lead is the Coalition of Health AI, where they're trying to say, let's standardize the way that AI models are described so that in the public and in private sector, common AI models could be reused or they could be purposed for different applications. If we have a common description of what the models are, what do they require? What are the data requirements? What are the functional requirements? What are the ways that you can monitor these models? That gives you the ability to assess whether or not a model fits your particular application. And then you got the next step of governance, which is really establishing within your organization, no model is going to be usable if you can't have the data in the right format with a certain level of quality that you can be assured that the model is going to produce the anticipated results because you have quality data. Now, not all data is going to be quality data. That's a process to get there. So that's why your catalog really becomes important. You got to describe the data and how good the quality is. And then you start creating a process where as models are deployed, you can scan and capture that metadata associated to those models to make it easier for the model builders to document their activities, because not a lot of data scientists consider the best part of their job documenting what they've done. But the really good ones understand how important that is. And then finally, there's the registries that you need to create for all deployed AI within your organization, and registries of potential AI that could be utilized. Because I kind of made the mention of a mole coming out. Right now, the environments are every application has a new AI component, and we have over 1,000, 1,500 applications that potentially could have AI components in them, and those systems weren't purchased with that in mind. So when they roll something like that out, you got to know it. And so that's where having that common registry is going to be super important moving into the future.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks.
For sharing.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug. I mean, I know that there's a lot to cover in this, and thank you for sharing those insights on both the data and AI governance side. I know we're at the top of we're at the half hour here, so we're about to wrap up. I mean, kind of just a couple key takeaways. Data governance and AI governance individually are both really, really critical capabilities, but it's when you bring them together that the whole is more than the sum of the parts that can drive real business outcomes from trust, effective and responsible AI, and really operating efficiently at scale. And so governance is more than just safeguards. It's really about being a business enabler. So coming full circle, no pun intended, the growth is happening in data and AI models. Like there's no slowing that down. So you have a choice to make of, you're going to manage this in a hard way, or you're going to manage this in an easy way. And hearing all of our speakers talk about it, it seems like, an easy way is getting ahead on your data governance solution. Doug talked about Microsoft Purview. And then there's also the AI governance software that needs to drive a lot of those capabilities that Jim was talking about. That's exactly what ModelOp does. And we'd love to show you more So please reach out to us, request a demo. There's a lot to dive into, but it's absolutely critical for enabling the business in the age of generative AI. And then lastly, you need an experienced partner that can also help you with the data and AI solutions. And that's exactly what Macula Systems is. So you can reach out to Kyle and Cam at results@maculassist.com. And we'd love to hear from you. Talk about your needs, talk about your challenges, because there is so much happening today, and it can be overwhelming. So we're here to help you. We hope you reach out. I will be sending out this recording and the deck, as always, as we do with all our webinars. So look for that in the next day. And we'll be announcing next month's webinar very, very soon. Thank you all for joining the Good Decisions webinar, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much.